Get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
Money is one of the biggest walls between people, and most of us were never taught to talk about money. Welcome to Get Ready Before Life Happens. I'm Tony Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Tricia Daniel. Tricia, welcome to Get Ready Before Life Happens.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, myself as well. You're doing some really cool stuff. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story, and how did it lead you to focus on how we talk about money?
Well, I've been talking about money since I was 3, not willingly, it was a conversation that naturally happened because I'm a third generation financial expert. My father's a financial planner. My grandfather's a financial planner. Before the name financial planner was even a term, I believe it was an agent, things like that. But having conversations about money was very easy because my dad started doing it at the breakfast table when I was 3. My parents divorced, and so my dad wanted to make sure that his daughters knew about money and knew how to talk about money because as a financial planner, he already watched people walking into his office devastated when a spouse passed or divorce. So we saw this disconnect already back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So he wanted to make sure that his daughters knew how to talk about money. So he would roll out a napkin and a pen and would start drawing for us at the breakfast table every single Saturday, and we still do it. Every single Saturday, we still talk about money, just having concepts, but making sure it was an easy conversation. So it's something that I've always been around. However, I didn't know that that wasn't common until I started getting on podcasts like this, being in other rooms, having conversations with people that talking about money gave them pure anxiety, would stress them out. They didn't even know where to start. So this is where I became passionate about sharing how to have these conversations easier. I call it money over easy since, over breakfast. But I think it's
I
like
like that.
conversations that we need to have more because it's so important. So that's where my passion began was as a little girl at the age of 3. Just didn't know I was going to talk about it until in my older age.
That is really awesome. And it's a reminder to everybody out there that financial literacy starts young and kids can pick up on concepts. Of course, you're not going to get into different types of investments with a 3-year-old, but conceptually, there's a lot of things that kids can pick up on. And as you said, it's about having a conversation, and just having a conversation shows your little one that it's okay to talk about money, that money is not a taboo subject. And as you said, it's about being prepared before life happens, with a divorce, with a widow, is that so often women especially are not prepared about money because they've never talked about it. So that it's so important to have those conversations.
It's very important because I didn't know when my dad was trying to prepare my sister and I as little girls, he wanted to do it just in case life happened. Well, life did happen to me. I started over after divorce, not once but twice. I've been an executive who's been laid off in downturns, like so many people go through, just that anxiety when you're laid off. What do I do? And gratefully, I had the tools. I just didn't realize it that my dad had been preparing me this whole way. And then the biggest part of my story now is then when I got remarried, after 15 years of divorce, I had been on my own, single mom, rebuilt, and I was so proud. But then I recently got remarried, blended a family of 6 boys.
Oh
And I
boy.
know I prayed for boys, just didn't realize how much my prayers had been answered. But then only 35 days after our wedding, my husband's spine shifted. And so did
Oh
everything
no.
in our lives. He, so far, over the last 4 years, has already gone through 5 different surgeries, 3 of those being spinal fusions. And one, as we talked about just before we pressed record, was just 2 weeks ago. Life changes very, very fast. Even we think everything is good, but it's how we walk through it. It's how we are prepared. And so I've been very, very grateful of, like, say, financial literacy, learning as a child and making it like joy, like drawing And so I've been able to reach back into that joy of, okay, my dad showed me in a positive way. How can I positively impact and not take and walk through this season in fear after life suddenly changed, but walk through it with being able to take a deep breath and walk through it in faith and preparation. And how can I help others be even more prepared when life changes suddenly for them too?
Yeah, that's so important, is to walk through it without fear, because money is something that terrifies so many people, is because, either we don't know about it or we have a scarcity mindset, that it's so easy to have these negative feelings about money. But money in and of itself really is nothing. It's just a vessel and
Yes,
a tool.
it's just a resource. It's a renewable resource that doesn't have a personality. It's not going to talk back to us. It's a resource that's renewable, but we are, like you said, scarcity. So many of us are taught that there's never going to be enough. How much is enough? And then they go back, am I enough? That's a word that I know so many, especially in women, they struggle with that word, enough, especially when the seasons get hard and that fear starts to set in.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to somebody who's feeling that fear? Um, what would you say to them?
My biggest thing was to start with is that, take a deep breath and remember who you are. Like in that season, because you're going to get hit with so many different things, and remembering truly who you are, what your skill set is. And that's when, and then what do you know is true? I kind of got like grounding. When you put 2 feet on the ground, your ground steady. Like it's there. And so remembering for you, where do you need to be grounded? What do you know is true? Okay. This injury happened. This life change happened. This divorce happened. Okay. I know that's true. But then now what I actually can do about it. So when we start worrying about the what ifs and if onlys, that can overtake so
Hmm.
many of our minds. We start going down the rabbit hole of worry. So sometimes to be able to block that cycle is just even a 2-second pause is kind of the neuroscience, bringing in the neuroscience of our that fight or flights. Well, we're not fighting a lion. We're fighting our own fear, just being able to take a deep breath and just that a little bit of a pause helps you kind of reset, calm the nervous system. And again, remembering what is true. What do I need to do next? What's my skill set? But the biggest part for me, I was reminding women who they are. This doesn't define them. This is a way they're going to get through it and use their story to actually help somebody else in being prepared. Just like what, I'm doing now, and I know you're doing through this podcast, making sure other people are prepared for when life changes. Because I found out statistics. If you look at the Social Security Disability Administration, they even said 1 out of 4 people will have some type of disability before age 65. And so being able to find these statistics of being prepared is not for, the end or the ultimate. It's being able to be prepared for the everyday life that's going to happen, whether we're ready or not, but being ready and being prepared is so important.
Yeah, and as you point out, it's the things that can happen along the journey, like with the statistics that you talk about, is most people are not permanently and totally disabled.
Mm-mm.
You may have a short-term disability, or unfortunately something like with your husband where it's a longer lasting impact. But all these things happen, and we think about it and we think, okay, well, it's total disability. I'm going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, but that's not usually the case. Is
Mm-mm.
you're able to partially recover or partially get back to work or fully recover. So those things happen. And as you talk about it, think about what 50% of marriages will end in a divorce. Widows, I think the average age for a widow in the US is 59. So which is a lot younger. The typical widow is not the 80-year-old
Mm-mm.
lady. It's a much younger age, so that's so important to understand that. So I'm glad
It's
you're
very
talking
important.
about that.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because It's not something that's far off. I've talked to many women where it's suddenly happened in their 20s. Just sharing my own story of, just right after a wedding, I have seen story after story of, younger couples, newly married couples, things can happen at any time. And that's where, that preparedness with insurance, with having understanding, that immediate cash you're going to need, having a preparedness plan of not the typical emergency fund, walking through of, what's going to 3 months, 6 months, just having a plan that you are talking about with your spouse, your kids, your parents, people around you, having these conversations and making it an everyday thing where it's not the doom and gloom. It's just being able to share how much you love them because you've been able to talk about this. So when it happens, it's not done out of fear. It's kind of a sense of peace and calm.
I love that, a sense of peace and calm. And as you talk about it, it's not about fear. And we talked about this pre-show that it's a gift of love, having
Hmm.
these conversations. So why do you feel it's a gift of love?
Because when you love somebody, just like whenever they pass, all of a sudden in the midst of their grief, they're having to plan a funeral. They're having to make arrangements. They're having to figure out where things are. They're living in fear. And when you love someone, you don't want them to be in fear. You want them to be in peace. You want them to feel how much you love them. And so if like you said, when all of a sudden if there's a surgery or something happened and you couldn't speak, you couldn't talk, you want to know that they're taken care of. Everything's set so they can be by your side or the children are taken care of. So I see it as an act of when we love each other, we help each other out. We prepare for things, not just in the good for preparing for a trip or a vacation, preparing for everyday life. And so I think of it as a way of caring for each other because that's what we love to do. We love to care for each other in different ways. Well, this is a part of caring for your family and those around you by having everything prepared and ready that they are taken care of for the next week or next 6 months, next year, next 10 years, because you've already sat down and talked with them and they feel at peace because they have the resources to go through it. Not everything's not happening. Peace is something within of they're able to walk through it each step because they've already had the instructions.
Yeah, and I think that's so important is to have these money conversations as you talk about. It is a gift of love. We can all think about, at least those of us who've reached a certain vintage, of people in our family who, or friends whose loved ones have passed away, and it's a real wall of work, I guess, for lack of a better word, because either they weren't organized or you don't really know what their true wishes were, or people
Hmm.
fall into conflict. So it's so important to, like you talk about, is to have these conversations so you can be prepared. So, when you have these conversations, what are some tips you would give people to facilitate the conversations, especially like, let's say, with a spouse who's not that interested in talking about money?
Oh, that's where I love that we use the word interest. Is I'm interested in knowing. Not, hey, I need to know where all the accounts are. I need to know the policy. It's, I'm interested in knowing. Just having a conversation over a cup of coffee, over tea. I always like, not very long. Just, I'm interested in knowing if something were to happen. You're in a hospital. What could I do for you? How could I make sure things are taken care of? What is one thing I might need to know today? And just sort of in being able to have it in a caring way instead of a demeaning way or I don't trust you. That's a lot of people is that trust when it comes to money. I don't trust you. But it's no, I'm interested in knowing so I can make sure your wishes, and I can carry through until you get better, until how can I can help you. I think it's a really thing of just having those, maybe it's just as simple of, hey, if I had $100, what could I do for you? Just something simple, just to kind of make it where it's not so scary. But I love, for especially people that are not numbers people, make it creative. Get some colored pencils, get some pens, get a piece of paper, and kind of make it a drawing of what does that look like in an image. I love my oldest son loves to share things in pictures, and he says, Mom, money is like a pizza. You can't eat the whole thing at once. You eat it a slice at a time. And being able to draw out your family pizza, just kind of going through it a slice at a time. Make it something visual. If you guys love to go camping, make it about a camping trip. How could we put together a plan to make a camping trip? Maybe it's at a house you want to go buy one day, or just make it something that is an interest. Maybe it's a board game. If their kids are little, or obviously not board games anymore, a video game. I just dated myself a lot, but just making sure, just have it in a conversation where, especially your children, if you're teaching them young, they're going to figure out, wait, this isn't scary. We're getting a plan. We know what it is. So something does happen and they are young, they already know, like, hey, this isn't scary. Mom and dad already talked about this. Let's prepare, just like my dad did for me. And I didn't really figure that out. Oh, this is why I'm not scared, because my dad's already walked me through this. It's the same thing. Just like when they had a lemonade stand, when, again, dating myself, we had lemonade stands back when we were kids. We got so excited when we got $20. Use an example. I'm going to give you $20. What would you like to go do with it? How can we make it grow? How can we set things back for the just in case? Make it just a really fun conversation that doesn't last more than 30 minutes, and just make it easier month to month.
Yeah, I love that. I was just taking some notes. One is talking about it brings it out into the open, which removes some of the fear. It's the
Yes.
things that we don't talk about that it's easy to build fear about. But as you talk about with little kids, is little kids, adults, whatever, teenagers like pizza. So, like you talk about, is you're talking about something that's on their terms
Mm-hmm.
rather than something that's about your terms. And when you're talking with a little one, you could talk about Legos or whatever, your kids are interested in. And that's a great way to do it. I love that advice. So, you know, what changes can people make to move from feeling shame about money to feeling confident to talking about it openly? Because a lot of us grow up and we feel shame around our money.
Shame is something I'm very, very passionate about talking about, because it is something I know in my own family. My mother really allowed, shame in her own life, especially around money and debt, not being in a particular place in life. She let it actually deteriorate so much that physically, it really, really affected her. So it's something that I like to talk about, because in my family, it wasn't talked about. Shame, the biggest part for me in breaking that shame, like you said, is bringing it out in the open. Whether it's, for example, debt. Debt is something a lot of people feel shame about and they don't want to talk about, especially if you are an executive or someone in leadership. And next thing you know, life changed. Like for ourselves, all the medical debt. So much medical debt has come in over, the past 5 years. And I'm third generation financial expert. I've been in finance and accounting for 30 decades. MBA, all the things. But life happens and it's how we step out of it. So for me, the biggest piece is the way to break shame is to bring it out in the open. Creating a notebook with everything that's right there. I mean, I have it, not just a spreadsheet, because I know for spreadsheets, sometimes it gets overwhelming, but just having the bills, looking at it, talking about it, going through it, making the plan, but not for too much, just again, like that 30 minutes, but being able to have it in small discussions. When you are able to say it out loud, it breaks the power it has over you, because shame thrives in silence. And I always call shame, it's that silent battle that you are having within yourself. It's like your own little inner war. But once you even speak one word about it, you've told a friend, you've told a consultant, a coach, someone you just feel, your spouse, your child, just one word can completely break that shame, because you've brought it out into the open and it no longer can have that power over you.
I love that. Shame thrives in silence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so valuable because so many people grow up and, you've seen your parents argue about money or you've made a money mistake yourself. I talk about on the show quite a bit is I had problems with credit cards when I was coming out of college.
Hmm.
And, we all have something where we're like, no, I wish I'd handled this differently, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's a learning process, and we all have something that we wish we'd probably done better. Um, so what are some of the curveballs that you see people navigating most often when it comes to their money?
The curveballs that they're navigating is like you just said, is being able to take something like your credit cards, like medical debt, and turning it and being able to make that
Mm,
curveball out of it. This is my story, and this is what I did. Because once you empower a friend and share with them, I had an issue with credit cards coming out of college, but this is how I turned the narrative. This is how I threw it into a curveball, and this is how I'm empowering other people to learn from my mistakes. And again, that's where you break that power of shame because you're speaking out loud. You're turning it into a curveball, turning it around of this is my story and this is what I did. And nothing feels so good. The first time I spoke out loud, sharing my story of divorce, being able to rebuild. Now, I knew I had rebuilt. I knew I was able to, you know, stand on my own 2 feet other again, but the shame kept me silent. Once I turned the narrative and shared it out loud, and somebody came right up to me and like, I did too. Thank you so much. You just set this free in me, and now I'm going to go. Nothing is when you throw that curveball and someone comes up to you and says, thank you. You're like, wow, my story. That's why I struggle with credit cards. That's why I went through the medical debt. That's why I went through because I'm going to help somebody else get prepared and help with their financial readiness. That is the best curveball. I mean, it can hurt at first, but wow, when you hit the home run with it and seeing somebody else being able to prepare, and because of you, I was ready for this curveball, and they say thank you. Nothing feels better.
that's awesome. That's something, that I think reflects on, somebody who's getting ready to go through a divorce
Hmm.
is to seek out somebody else who's divorced. And like for widows, there's something called the Modern Widows Club. And I've had on the chair of the Modern Widows Club to talk about it. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So if you know somebody who's a widow, or you are a widow yourself, the Modern Widows Club has some fantastic resources um, for you. So, one other question is, how can people begin thinking about legacy in a meaningful way that reflects their faith and their worth?
Mm. Seeing how things are lasting past you. And we were talking about earlier, my dad said something really powerful the other day that, he'd been around so many financial advisors and financial coaches are so focused on those assets under management. How many assets do you have? Do you have this? Do you have that? So a lot of us, that shame breaks it because we don't have that level of assets. So being able to show that it's not about assets under management, it's the people under care. And how are you taking
Mm,
what you have and making sure it lives past you? It's not what you're accumulating, it's what you've empowered your children, your community, other widows, other divorcees, of being able to take resources, whether it's a little or a lot, and they're not able looking at that little with fear. They're able to take just that resource and in faith be able to help somebody else with it because then that's where it grows and that's where it grows and that's where you have the more people under your care that's going to go on and keep sharing that with past when your voice can no longer share, it keeps going. And I think that's such a powerful thing of not looking at the monetary number but all those non-monetary resources that live on past us.
I absolutely love that, when we think about our legacy, but I also think, what you say is so powerful for people who are managing other people's money or, whatever is, if you're selling products or, in any field, as you say, it's about the people under your care. As a manager,
Yeah.
your employees are more than numbers. They're the people that you're responsible for.
Oh,
And a
absolutely.
good leader.
Yeah, that's when my dad, we had this conversation over breakfast just a few weeks ago. And he was really concerned because he's like, I see so many advisors and consultants and planners now. That's all they're focused on. That's all they see the care is assets under management. And it's like, what happened about people under care? Because these are long-term relationships of seeing these people. And it's like in his own profession, because he's done this since the 1960s, and still going, at being able to see these people start off for as young and grow old or changes and create businesses, sell businesses. This is a long-term relationship. These are people underneath our care, and it's so much bigger than just that number of assets.
I love that. Have a long-term relationship rather than a transactional, uh, I guess, relationship is
Hmm.
a good way to put it. And, I had some leadership training for outdoor stuff. And that was definitely the thing is, that you're responsible for a group of people.
Hmm.
And that's really, for me, where I learned that leadership skill, that it's about the people. It's not about anything else. So, if you take care of the people under your care, you're a good leader. And if
Yes.
you don't, then you're not a good leader. And it's pretty easy, when you think, well, it's easy to say, it's not easy to do all the time.
No, no. And as a professed introvert, it's been a very hard thing for me to learn. I mean, I love being behind my computer screen. That's really, really easy for me. But in this last 4 or 5 years of understanding the power of people under your care and sharing, and even, that first time you ever share your story, that's such a hard step. But once you do, the people underneath your care relate to you, and it makes you even a more powerful leader.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it makes you a different kind of leader,
Yeah.
um, because you go to somebody who really supports your team. And when you support your team, people perform better,
Yeah.
because they feel that. So before we wrap up, I did want to ask you, because you have a care package that you offer on your website. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yes, it was actually inspired by a couple years ago. We had a bunch of fires on the West Coast. We had flooding on the East Coast, and all these people suddenly their lives were just up. They just turned into turmoil. And so I created a financial care package. It's a care package of being able to give those first resources for the first week, 3 months, 6 months to a year, being able to give your family something in a moment's notice. It's a checklist that just helps you walk through those initial things to get your family ready and just things to think about, have those easier conversations. And so I call it financial care package, just being able to have that something right there and ready for your family, no matter if you are there or if you are not. And you are welcome to find it. I call it sown.life. That's SOWN.LIFE. I have a Sown is a starting over wealth network. So I have a network of women that have started over after divorce, passing of a spouse, or other major life changes, being able to have those resources ready and available to you. And so, but it's Sown.life, and it's a financial care package. It's a free checklist, and it's available to you.
And for everybody watching and listening, there will be a link in the show notes so you can easily find this. So
Yeah.
you'll be able to access it for yourself. So, Tricia, let's move into what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. And these are three quick questions I ask all of my guests. The
Okay.
first one is, what's one money myth you're trying to break?
Ooh, that money is limited.
Mm,
It's a renewable resource, but we are taught that it is limited. That is, it's that you're never going to have that limit. You're never going to be achievable. It's a moving target, but it is just a resource, and it's renewable every day.
yeah, I love that. And that can be hard. I know for some people, if you're really scraping by financially, it can be hard to think about that. But there are ways to always move forward. And sometimes it's not easy.
Mm-mm.
For most of it's not easy. So, but it is possible, and
Yes.
that's the thing. So I love that advice. So let's get out the time machine for a minute.
Mm.
If you go back in time, knowing what you know now about money and communication, what advice would you give your younger self?
To actually do it. When you hear advice, actually do it. So my dad taught me so much growing up, but I never did it. I was like, Dad, why didn't you make me do it? He's like, well, that was up to you. So now I share with my nieces and nephews, go do it. Invest now, whether you're 5 years old, 10 years old. I have a family of 6 boys. So I'm encouraging, do it now. If you're given a piece of advice, no matter what age, even if you're in your 80s, don't just take the knowledge and store it away somewhere. Don't hoard it. Go actually do it. So I would love to go back in a time machine, and I wish I was taking all my dad's advice and actually doing it and investing right then. Because in my 50s now, no telling what I could have grown to.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because we do hear advice and we oftentimes don't act on it. And it's like, why do you ask for advice if you're not going to, at least consider acting on it? But it is hard when you're in your 20s
Oh,
to
I was like, yeah,
think
okay,
about it.
Dad. Okay, like you said, I'm going to go to the mall now. Back when there was more, I would go,
Yeah.
I was more interested in shopping or getting my house or, when my children were young, of course, giving them all the things, especially after divorce. I will fully admit of, you know, always trying to give my kids things. It was more out of, guilt and things. I wish I would have shown even my children when they were young, first out, hey, let's take that money and just show different things, different ways to express love. So no, it's hard, but I really wish I would have done that. So right now I'm working on my own language, and talking to my boys since they're ages 8 to 24, all different age ranges, but the different language of being able to share the power of listening to that voice advice and doing it now.
I love that. Share the power of listening to advice. Now, I can even imagine what it'd be like to raise 6 boys. That's crazy.
It's a
Sorry.
blended family, and it's again, it's. I had 6 sisters in a blended family growing up.
Oh,
Again, I just got a
wow.
lot more boys than I prayed for, but at least they'll watch Star Wars with me. So
Well, that's cool.
yeah,
Always somebody to watch Star Wars
yes,
with that six
exactly.
one. So to wrap up, what's your number one tip to change the way we think about money?
Remember who you are.
Mm,
Remember who you are. Even though you feel like there's all this mud kind of covering up after life, all these events, being able just to kind of shed it away. Remember who you are. Who were you created to be? What are my gifts, not hers or his, but remembering who you actually remember, that childlike joy, like just trying to remember back when you were 7, 6, 5, go back and find that joy again around money and then move forward.
I love it. And I think you said something in there that's especially powerful is to remember what your particular gifts are, not
Hmm.
someone else's gifts or the gifts you wish you have. Because we all have our particular thing that we're good at.
Hmm.
And usually we're the best at certain things and really bad at other things. So, it is, yeah, you want to work on your weak spots, but, concentrating on your strong spots, they are your strong spots.
Yeah,
So
and so
that's
many times we
powerful
we
advice.
forget we forget what they are, or we're like, what are my strong spots? Because we've been focusing so much on the weak or somebody else's. It's like, wait, what are my strong points? And then really sitting with that and writing it down, and it's very, very powerful once you actually empower yourself with that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I go back to I'm a hoop head, is, thinking about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar automatically comes to mind
Yeah.
is with his skyhook. So anybody who's a basketball player is when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did a skyhook, he was basically unstoppable. So he didn't, try to become a three-point shooter.
Hmm.
He did his skyhook and he was completely unstoppable. And that was his strong skill that he was better than anybody at.
Yeah.
And so, I look at that as a perfect example of what you do when you lean on your skill.
That's a perfect example. I'm actually have the image in my mind right now. I love
Yeah,
we
Kareem doing
my
that.
son, yeah, my son and I watch a lot of sports documentaries, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And I mean, no one else did that before, and he would have never have done that if he wouldn't have really like what is my skill set? What are all my attributes together? My height, and being able to do that, and then it was legendary. And each of us have that legendary skill within us once we just sit down and like, okay, who am I and what are my strengths? And you're going to create something that's legendary that's going to live on past you. Um, but you still have to start.
Yeah, you just have to start. Sorry, I was just making a note because I love that. We each have a legendary skill within us, but you do have to start. So, Tricia, where can people learn more about you and follow you and get in touch with you about your work?
Oh, I would love for people to come follow me at triciadaniel.com, and that's TRICIA DANIEL.com. And we are launching again my own podcast again, the Money Over Easy Show. And so where we can carry on more of these conversations also. So come see me over there. We're launching soon. But come to triciadaniel.com and sown.life. That's SOWN.LIFE for more of that care package and more on financial anxiety.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. And for people watching and listening, as always, you can go to the show notes and find all of the links. So if you have access to show notes, check out the links there. Tricia, thanks for joining us on Get Ready Before Life Happens.
Thank you so much for having me, and I cannot wait to speak more with you soon.
Cool. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of Get Ready Before Life Happens. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money or being ready and being prepared, please be sure to subscribe and to like this video. You can also join the Get Ready movement at tonystewart.com to receive my newsletter and access to free resources. And if you want to support the show, you can do so now at buymeacoffee.com/Tony Stewart. Because when life happens, the way you think about money matters.